right? So I think what we'll do is, okay, good, we're recording. Yeah, I think we'll kick it off right now. So welcome everybody for attending this very, very unique opportunity for us to listen to Sam, and I'll have our close friend and colleague, Steve Bassadeur, the Senior Trade Commissioner for Canada in Mongolia, to do the honors of introducing our guest tonight. So Steve, over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Ryan. Thank you everyone for joining. Again, my name is Steve Bassadeur, and I'm here in Ulaanbaatar, Trade Commissioner at the Canadian Embassy. It's a pleasure to be able to be with you and to introduce Sam Bowles, the COO of Aspire Mining, who has a very, very interesting presentation. And I would just say, again, it's a pleasure to work with Ryan and MSTA. This is not the first time we've done this so online, but hopefully sometime in the near future we can start doing some of the activities that we usually do, like which involve travel. I would just say that in Mongolia, I don't want to talk, but Mongolia is a place right now where we're starting, and Sam is a great example of that. We're starting to see more economic activity. Mongolia has done a very, very good job in terms of controlling the pandemic. It's taken very harsh measures, meaning basically the closing down the borders and not to international travel. But with its proximity to China, and after a couple of months of real hardship, because they even closed the borders with China to exports of raw materials, which is mainly coal and copper. Now the borders are starting to reopen, and we see the exports starting to climb. So it's good to see that things are moving here. There's still a long way to go, but you know, take a look at Mongolia. It's a mining country. 90% of the exports are mining related, and the country is right now at a crossroads where we're seeing. Hopefully, we have elections coming up in a couple of weeks, or actually next week, and I think mining is going to be just a bigger and growing emphasis going forward. So. Again, thanks everyone for joining, and I would hand over the mic to Sam. Sam, once again, thank you very much for taking the opportunity to meet with all of us here, in Canadians here in UV, Mongolia, and in Canada.
All right, thank you very much, Steve. I think also thank you to everyone for joining today. It's actually quite a privilege to be able to talk to a diverse and wide range of vendors. And certainly appreciate the opportunity to describe our project and potentially find some support. So can we put the presentation up? Okay, so today the presentation itself is just a general introduction to our project, where we're at, what we're doing, and how we aspire, no pun intended, to be a world-class coal producer in Mongolia. So if we go to the next slide, just to give an overview of the actual project. Aspire owns a couple of licenses in Mongolia, and it's been present in country for over 10 years now. The main project that we are looking to develop first is called the Ovoot mine. It's a coking coal deposit in the northwest of Mongolia, which is fairly different to the coal mining that I guess Mongolia has come to be known for, which is mostly occurring in the South Gobi area. So the mine will be developed about 600 kilometres to the west of Erdenet, which is the second city of Mongolia. For the mine to transport product to Erdenet, we need to construct approximately 300 kilometres of paved road, and we'll be looking to utilise existing paved road, the remaining 300 kilometres to Erdenet, where there is a railhead. And from the railhead, there's capability to export coal both to China and to Russia, and we have customers in both China and Russia who are interested in the coal that we have to offer. The coal is classified as a fat coal in China. I don't know whether that's familiar terminology in Canada, but a fat coal is basically a coking coal that has high fluidity, good plastic and coking properties, and generally it's used as a, not as a base load, but as a specialist coal in the coke making blend, and it allows the coke producers to utilise a wider range of lower quality coals in their blend. So it's cost effective for the coke producers, and it actually makes the coal reasonably valuable. The deposit, the Ovoot deposit, is approximately 250 million tonnes in a JORC reserve, and the initial, I guess, mine plan and cost estimate work that went behind that indicated a mining rate of up to 10 million tonne per annum and in excess of 20 years of mine life. So if we go to the next slide. So if we go to the next slide, please. Yep. So whilst initial planning for the whole life of mine was targeting very high levels of production, this was really requiring a massive capital investment up front. At 10 million tonne per annum, the scale of the mine is much larger, the supporting infrastructure is much larger. It wouldn't be feasible to be doing road transportation. We would need to be building a railway, probably about 600 kilometres of rail. And then there was the issue of whether there was capacity on the Trans-Mongolian line to then transport another 10 million tonne of freight every year. And in recognition of that and wanting to start a little bit more conservatively, there was a plan that was discussed with investors last year that was reducing to approximately 4 million tonne per annum. But that's actually been revised further downward to a 1.5 million tonne per annum ROM operation. And this is really just to make sure that we can start it up with available capital, not taking on too much risk, and at the same time, whilst reducing the production rate, we need to focus very heavily on becoming a world-class operation. And it's probably not apparent to most people in the audience, but this area where the mine is to be developed is a very sensitive area in Mongolia. It's in Ovoot province, and I guess it's the paradise of Mongolia, and it's very near and dear to the hearts of many Mongolians, and they certainly don't want to see an environmentally destructive operation in their backyard. Now, we, of course, being an international company and familiar with the standards expected in developed countries, we want to make sure that that's at the bare minimum what we would apply here. But the trick is that there aren't really many examples in Mongolia where there is world-class environmental management of mining operations. There are some, and let's say, for example, the Bora Gold operation, which was operated by Centerra, is a good example. Oyu Tolgoi, operated by Rio Tinto, provides some good examples. But by and large, and particularly the coal mining operations in the South Gobi, they did not present world-class environmental practices. And Mongolian people are justifiably unhappy about that, and would be very concerned that our company would just copy those standards and not improve things. But we, from the very beginning, are committed to making sure that what we do is world class. So this 1.5 million tonne per annum downgraded production schedule, it's a conservatively robust forecast. It's intended to be a low capex development, relying on mining and transportation contractors, utilising some existing infrastructure in the public road that's there, and developing on site small scale but scalable infrastructure so that we can grow at a later date after achieving some successful milestones. This should be able to achieve a positive cash flow quite quickly, which is also important. The initial mining in the first 5 years, it's planned at 1.5 million tonne per annum, is targeting an area where there is low stripping ratio coal, less than 5:1. As I said, we'll be implementing world-class standards, and this applies to safety, technological, productivity, environmental. We're focused on creation of value-added products, and this is specifically in reference to the fact that we plan to wash the coal that we are planning to mine. That in Mongolia is not yet common. There's only a handful of operations who are processing coal that they're selling, and the vast majority of coal mined in Mongolia is exported raw. And we'd certainly be looking to implement progressive rehabilitation of the site in which we're working, and that's also something that certainly is not normal practice in Mongolia currently. The other area where we want to be different is to be properly committed to social responsibility. The area in which we're looking to develop the mine, because there isn't other mining in that region currently, and there really isn't much industry in that region, the population there really could benefit from the economic stimulus that the activity will bring to the region. We see creation of more than 1,000 permanent, well-paid jobs, and probably another 500 plus during the construction stages. We are already in quite deep discussion with the local community leaders around having a community development agreement in place, and that's focused on delivering improvements in line with the United Nations Sustainable Development Guidelines. So, the main strategic goals in starting this operation at a smaller scale are to establish the Ovoot brand as a source of premium fat coal, demonstrate proof of concept in that we can mine in a socially, environmentally and economically viable manner, and by doing this we'll establish a solid foundation for expansion of the business. And of course, when the foundations are laid, we would like to be expanding, probably not in one step from 1.5 million tonne per annum to 10 million tonne per annum, but we would look to progressively upgrade our capacity as there's capability of the logistics chain to handle more product. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so this is a very high-level timeline for development of the project, and this slide was taken from a presentation delivered about 6 months ago, and unfortunately due to COVID-19 some of these time frames are slipping a little. I think generally you could move everything back 3 to 6 months from what this is forecasting. One of the main issues that the virus has caused for us is the government here have implemented rules around how people can congregate, and this is impacting on our ability to meet with community as part of the permits and approvals processes. So some of the permits that we need to move forward on, we simply can't obtain at the moment because we cannot meet with the community en masse. But that still progressing positively. There's no issues in that regard. It's just the mechanics of actually getting people together that's causing some delay. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, so as I said, we need to be building, it's a little bit over 200 kilometres of road from the project site to the city of Morin. There is really only dirt tracks. For anybody who's been to Mongolia, if they've been in the countryside, they'll realise that roads really aren't roads at all. They're just dirt tracks followed by four-wheel drives in all different directions. And there's also a requirement, a legal requirement, that mining products are hauled on paved roads only and not on unpaved roads. So to build this road for the transportation of that product, the technology that we've looked at to achieve sufficient durability and low cost operation and minimising the capex required is a technology called Ovoot. It was developed in Norway in the 1950s, I believe. It's been used around the world in hot climates, cold climates, wet, dry, and generally it's seen as a low-cost approach to creating a paved surface for dust control and safety of trafficability. This road will also be of significant benefit to the communities through which it passes. Often in this area in Mongolia, particularly in winter, traversing the countryside becomes quite difficult and certainly can be quite dangerous. But having a paved road in operation will provide access for people's own private and personal use, but should also be supportive of other businesses trying to operate and export from the area. Next slide, please. So here we have just a basic overview of the first potentially 5 years of operation at 1.5 million tonne per annum. The deposit actually consists of 3 seams, and this is actually targeting the upper seam only. As you can see, it's quite a thick coal seam, certainly quite thick for a coking coal product. And this is what allows us to target quite a low stripping ratio over the first 5 years of operation. And you could also see that that stripping ratio wouldn't be expected to increase quickly beyond this. In the top left, there's a picture just showing the actual license, which is the funny shaped I don't know, area circled by a red perimeter line. And inside of that, you can see where our JORC resource has been defined. The magenta outline shows what was the pit shell for the 4 million tonne per annum concept that was communicated to market last year, and that was for 4 million tonne per annum over 12.5 years. But inside of that, the green perimeter is the outline of 5 years pit for operating at 1.5 million tonne per annum. And inside of that, in a blue circle, is basically the very first starter pit. The picture in the top centre is just a 3D outline from the mine planning software showing the pit shape. Basic schedule numbers in the top right, and then below that is a long section through the pit showing how it would be developed as a series of pushbacks. It's different to, I guess, typical coal mining where it's a strip mining scenario. This is designed more similarly to a metalliferous mine with a series of pushbacks used to uncover more coal sequentially. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, this is still very much conceptual at this stage. We've had certainly some detailed discussions with coal wash plant manufacturers, but we haven't proceeded yet with EPC contract to build something on site. We are mainly looking at modular solutions that would allow for the majority of the construction work to occur off-site, and really it would be just looking at a plug-and-play type setup on-site to minimise the time and the difficulty to construct this in a fairly remote area without many services around. Compared to every other coal operator in Mongolia, we want to differentiate ourselves by ensuring that we are enclosing coal stockpiles and that is to minimise the footprint and also minimise the potential for dust generation, but also in the long term it should prove to be quite economical. Generally in Mongolia, coal is handled by wheel loaders into semi-trailer trucks across large areas. It's unproductive for the trucks, it's an expensive way to handle coal, and for a 1.5 million tonne per annum operation, we're looking at setting up silo stockpile for between 50 and 100,000 tonnes of product coal, and underneath that set up an automated truck loadout system. And this would ensure that we can operate with a minimum number of road haulage trucks, and it'll be a very productive operation. Most of the other coal producers in Mongolia who are actually processing their coal do use water efficient technologies such as filter press, fines disposal, because water is such a critical resource in Mongolia. Certainly for the South Gobi operations, water is very hard to come by. In the Hoofschool region where we are going to be operating, water is not so scarce. However, it's certainly still a very, very sensitive topic in terms of minimising how much water that we draw from the environment, and definitely it's a zero discharge requirement, so we can't be in a situation where we'd be forced into discharging water from, say for example, tailings dam to back to a river. So we're also looking at filter press technology, not having any tailings storage on site, but actually co-disposing of dried reject material inside waste dumps. Okay, if we go to the next slide, please. So the logistics operation, we're also very much focused on differentiating ourselves from our competitors in the Gobi. As a background, in the Gobi, the standard mode of coal transportation is in very heavily overloaded semi-trailer trucks, usually a Chinese constructed prime mover and trailer. The trailer will typically hold about 80 or 90 tonnes of coal, and as a result, generally axle loads are in the vicinity of 20 to 22 tonnes. These trucks move very slowly. They're typically underpowered for what they're trying to haul. They are certainly not safe in their operation. Their braking is terrible. There's many accidents in the Gobi involving these trucks, and this is in an area where there is relatively little third-party traffic on special purpose roads that were built by the mining companies. Where we will be operating, there is certainly between Erdmet and Murin on the public road network that we plan to utilise, there is a reasonable amount of third-party traffic. And we cannot even contemplate using the same technologies that are being deployed in the South Gobi. What we're looking at is, I guess, very similar to what is used in Australia, where it's termed an A-double, and I think in Canada it would be called an A-train, where it's a prime mover pulling a semi-trailer, and behind that a dolly and another semi-trailer. And we will be keeping axle loads within what would be considered normal ranges. The limit here on the public road is 11.5 tonnes, which is, I think, fairly similar to most countries on their public road networks. And as a consequence, we'd be looking at a double trailer setup that's hauling somewhere in the vicinity of 50 to 60 tonnes of payload for a gross combined mass of 80 to 90 tonnes. All of this is really subject to getting the correct approvals from the government, the Ministry of Roads and Transportation, to allow, firstly, a vehicle of gross combined mass larger than what's currently permitted on the road, and then also a vehicle that is longer than what is currently permitted on the road. But we're confident that there are benefits to all stakeholders in allowing this. There's certainly a reduction in fuel required and consequently a reduction in emissions. With less trucks on the road, there's less of a community impact. And if we utilise Tier 1 equipment, we will be able to have trucks that can maintain highway speed, and that will reduce the need for a third-party traffic to be overtaking, which is probably one of the riskiest things that's seen on the road here in Mongolia. Similarly, before I mentioned we're talking about having an automated truck loading facility. The trucks that we're looking at would also need to be capable of unloading themselves, which is different to the trucks that are used in South Gobi. So we're looking at side tipping trailers, and these side tipping trailers will be dumping directly into a hopper at the rail terminal. From that hopper will be conveyed to another silo storage system, and underneath that there would be an automated train loadout system. I think this logistics area is probably where I am probably looking for the most help in terms of implementing world-class technologies. There are not a lot of vendors in Mongolia that can currently assist with what we need here. And I think Canada, in my understanding, fairly similar to Australia, in that there is a long history of trucking being an important industry. It's a large country, big distances, and I understand that use of semi-trailer or B-train or A-train trucks is reasonably common. So I'm hoping that there might be some good ideas come from Canada and some good products that we could utilise. Okay, so the next slide is really just explaining what our focus is on with regards to our corporate social responsibility. Really, we want to differentiate ourselves from the majority of the players here in Mongolia. The owner, not the owner. Up until last year, Aspire was a majority Australian-owned company, and at the end of last year, there's a businessman in Mongolia called Mr. Tsarnapuntsog, and he purchased on market and now holds 51% ownership of the company. And in doing that, there's now certainly understanding in Mongolia that Aspire is not a foreign company, it is a Mongolian company. The managing director is Mongolian, and there's a real commitment to doing what is right for Mongolia with how the company proceeds the operation. And then the last slide is just a brief bio on myself and my boss, Archid. I can probably just summarise that I've been here in Mongolia for a little bit over 10 years now. And that whole time I've been involved in coal mining, and prior to that I was working in Australia for about 10 years also in coal mining. Okay, so I think, if we just go to the last slide. This is just the brief bio I mentioned, but I think that's probably not of that much interest, and maybe it's time for some questions.
Thanks a lot, Sam. So what I've asked everyone is if they could, if they do have a question, that they utilize the chat function, and then I would then parrot that question off to Sam. To everyone, I've also mentioned that is being recorded, so they'll be able to get that recording, a link to it. Once we get it up online, we'll be sharing that with people. One question we have here, Sam, is it says, which party is responsible for design and maintenance of the road between the mine and the rail link?
There is a local Mongolian consultant who's been responsible for completing the feasibility study for the road and the design for construction. We haven't yet finalised that. There's needed to be some revision on account of changes in the approved routing. We will be looking to use local contractors for construction, but there will be no issue in terms of having an international company overseeing that and then subcontracting to local capabilities. In terms of maintenance of the road, at this stage we had assumed that we would be needing to do that ourselves, but certainly I'll be happy to entertain outsourcing that to a more focused contractor who could bring better expertise than what we could internally.
Okay, thank you very much, Sam. Another question here. In order to supply our products, FI, a flexible intermediate bulk container for Aspire Mining, how should we keep in touch? For the export from Mongolia, what would be the percentage of production with semi-bulk load? Any projection? So,
to be honest, I'm not really clear what the question is.
What would be the percentage of production? Yeah, what would be the percentage of production with semi-bulk load? I'm not sure if I'm saying it right. If they could kind of, I think
this question is about using shipping containers for export of coal, which is I think it's a trend that's catching on in Mongolia. To be honest, at this stage, it's a mode of coal transportation that is not preferred. We prefer to be setting up, I guess, more standard facilities for direct loading of coal into rail wagons rather than putting coal in a shipping container at the mine site, transporting that on a flatbed, and then loading it onto the rail. The quantity of containers that we would need to sustain something like that is enormous, and it becomes impractical.
Okay. I have another one here. Could you share more on what types of smart controls you are looking for fuel efficiency and driver?
Yep. Okay, so this is, I guess, mainly in regards to the long-haul transportation, so the on-road trucking. So across the roughly 600-kilometre journey, we want to be making sure that we're doing that as cost effectively as possible, and also at the level in terms of safety that we must achieve. Otherwise, we won't have social licence to operate. So roughly in our cost breakdown, the cost of trucking is probably 50 to 55% of our total cost of product delivered to market. And fuel is a huge component of that. So in terms of truck monitoring, I understand that many of the tier one vendors have their own proprietary systems for measuring fuel burn and measuring driver behaviour or recording driver behaviour, selecting the appropriate gears for the right locations, controlling vehicle speeds. But there's also aftermarket systems that are perhaps more capable and also able to be deployed across trucks from multiple vendors. There's no guarantee that we'd only use one type of truck. At the moment, we're looking at Scania, Volvo, Mercedes, on the basis that they've had representation here in Mongolia, but other manufacturers could also be considered so long as they can provide the service in country to keep that fleet operating. And just roughly, if we were restricted only to single trailer operation, we will need approximately 160 prime movers. If we can gain the permissions to run a double trailer operation, that'll drop down to about 80 or potentially less if the gross combined mass can be increased.
Okay, great. I have one here from Site Power Inc. Are you planning to proceed with digital informational support of operations from the very beginning, or when?
Okay, it's a pretty broad question, I guess. Generally, from the beginning, I think, I guess it depends to what extent. Like, I would like to think that we have database information across all of our operations from very early on in the project. So that could be mine dispatch system, like something similar to a site tech control system in the wash plant. Certainly, I'd like the trucking operation to be somewhat automated. So whether it's RFID control or GPS control in terms of knowing what's been loaded into what truck and when, where that truckload is, and the unloading similarly. And that way we'd be tracking any variations in quantities, qualities, etc. And I hope that answers the question. I think information is very important when you're trying to run a business like this, and digitising that certainly allows for much more information to be drawn from. Right.
So I guess the short answer is yes, and just a little more of a dialogue will kind of get a better understanding of those needs. Here's one for the modularization effort. Is there a target city you have considered to do the process facility construction? Are you thinking of Erdenet?
Look, it could be. We haven't really designated where that would need to be. I mean, potentially if the modularization could be done so that everything was able to be shipped in standard shipping containers and bolted together, could be anywhere and brought into country. But look, it'd be fantastic from our social point of view if we could do more of that manufacturing in country, and I think there'd be some economic benefit to both vendor and customer if that could be done.
Right, right. Here's one. Is the mine purchasing the truck tractor trains directly?
That would be preferable. It really will come down to what we're capable of doing financially. Obviously, to develop this project, there's a fair bit of capital investment that's got to be put into road, wash plant, and train loadout facility. And money doesn't grow on trees, as we all know. If the right financing opportunity was there, I think we would certainly look to purchase the equipment and own and operate it ourselves, so long as that OEM support was available in country.
Okay. In terms of haul trucks, are you what are you looking for inside the open pit operation?
Okay. All of the budgeting so far has been done quite conservatively on rental fleet of Caterpillar equipment supplied from the local Caterpillar dealer. But that's actually not the preference. I'm not sure if people will be familiar with it, but there's a term called extra heavy commercial vehicles. And this is basically ruggedized on-road trucks for mining purpose. And generally what they offer is a significantly reduced fuel burn compared to standard off-highway trucks because they have a much lower tear weight. Now, there's one manufacturer I know of in Canada. It's called Dramas. They're related to Simard suspension. But in Europe, there's also a few manufacturers. One's called BAS mining trucks, which bases their construction on a Volvo platform. There's I think it's a Dutch company called Genaf, and a Finnish company called Sisu Auto, and they just generally make 10 by 6 or 10 by 4 trucks that can haul typically 50 to 60 tons of material, and they the capital cost is significantly less compared to, say, a Cat 773 or Komatsu 465. And their fuel burn is much less, and they're based on commonly available components from tier 1 manufacturers like Mercedes, Volvo, etc.
Right. Okay, thanks. Alan from K-Tech Earth Movers. He says he's able to send you a presentation on their road building and overburden removal equipment. So we'll make sure he has your contact information for that.
Right. That sounds
yeah.
good.
Do you know the approximate grades that you will be on the haul roads? Okay. The grades of the haul roads.
Yeah, look, in the mine, we won't design anything more than 10% grade, and on the on-road transportation, we're making sure that there's nothing more than 5% grade. It's actually generally it's a downhill haul from the mine to the terminal, but there is elevation gain and loss along the route.
Okay, great. Brody White from GHG Satellites. He thanks you for a very interesting presentation. He's using some acronyms here, so I'll hopefully you understand what they are. When considering the SDGs and the social license to operate, can you share your thoughts or the planned uses of remote sensing and technologies during the lifetime of this project?
Okay. So SDGs is the Sustainable Development Guidelines.
Okay, that's right. Okay.
Yeah, and now we're talking about remote sensing opportunities for understanding our impact in line with those SDGs. But to be honest, it's not something I'm particularly familiar with. From an environmental point of view, certainly there's some opportunities for air quality, water quality monitoring, remote sensing. Potentially that's, I guess, satellite based. Could be looking at flora monitoring around the project site and along the road. I think that's probably just what comes to mind, but certainly if there's technologies out there that could assist, I'd be very interested to hear about them.
Okay, perfect. I think that's Brody from from GHG Satellite, so he'll be reaching out to you. Wayne from Aspen Custom Trailers, he asks, what do you see as a timeline required to have truck trains in operation?
Look, I think realistically, the October next year will be commissioning.
Okay.
So it's about six months back on the time frame in this presentation.
Right. Okay, good. And I don't know if you might have answered this one, all right, but are you interested in or require to do emissions requirements? That might have been the air quality.
The requirements are very rudimentary, but obviously there's best practices far in excess of that, and yes, we would be interested to understand more of what's possible, and certainly we want to put forward a very compelling case to government and community that we are implementing world-class technologies.
Okay, great. And there's one here, I guess it's back on here. Wayne's asking, what is the purchase process for the on-highway trains?
Look, where we are right now, it's really just information gathering. But once we've got some more information, understanding what is possible, then it'll be a tender process.
Okay. Okay.
But one of the difficulties there is just understanding what the government will permit when we don't actually have the permission in hand yet, and that has an impact on trailer design. So, for example, if we're restricted to the current public road requirement of 44-ton GVM only, that's basically a standard semi-trailer. But if we're going to get approval in the future for a gross combination mass, which allows for another trailer, that opens the door for either a B train or an A train type setup. Yeah, it's just, we're still in the process of negotiating with the Ministry of Roads and Transportation for an approval to run a combination. And that's probably what's the key thing to hold up a serious tender for a full fleet purchase.
Right. Okay. Well, I think that's that was a good series, a flurry of questions there. Really good quality questions, and I think they're letting you off the hook right now. So you know, I'd like to thank you right now for again taking the time to present to us. True to your name, Aspire. It's a very I think it's very impressive, the goals that you want to be. You want to be world class there, and a really interesting project there. So I'll leave it to Steve for any last words if you want. Oh, sorry, Steve, you're on mute here. Go ahead. No, I think you have to get unmuted.
Can you hear me? Just once again, Sam, thank you for taking the time to share a very interesting project, and wish you all the best with it going forward, and look forward to staying in touch. And Ryan, great to see you. And in Canada, hello everybody. Hopefully one day you can come to Mongolia. Not too far. It's a beautiful place, and definitely worth the effort to visit and to work.
That's right. That's right. And again, to everybody, it's we'll send out this recording. The contact details to Sam we'll include, and yeah, and if there's any questions or help you need, you have Steve and myself as well for further support. So thanks again for everybody taking the time. Thanks, Sam, again, and Steve. Really appreciate it. So take care, everybody.
Take care.
Thank you all.
Bye.